And that's when it hit me. I was in really big trouble.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Priority Holder, and today we'll be playing Red-Black Control in the Timeless format. So this deck is built around the card Sorceress's Schemes, so it returns an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, or exiled card Flashback you own to your hand, gives you a rebate of 1 red mana, and has Flashback itself. And so, in Final Fantasy Draft, people figured out that with 2 copies of this and something like Lightning Bolt or Thunder Magic, and given enough time and mana, you can basically have infinite removal, because these can loop each other and you can just have your selection of your spells in your graveyard. So I figured I'd try and port that idea into Timeless by just upgrading like all the spell slots, you know. So we have like 4 copies of Lightning Bolt, 4 copies of Thoughtseize, 4 copies of Inquisition, and by doing so we've created like a red-black control deck. So we have a little bit of graveyard hate, and we're hoping to just, you know, go really low on the win conditions and just grind people out, possibly recycling Lightning Bolts and sending them to the face. Now some more accelerated win conditions we have are like Kroxa being able to like shell out tons of damage, or Lurrus being able to attack. But other than that, it's just interaction. You can see a few rafts, see a little bit of card selection. So we're just hoping to absolutely grind some games out. So let's jump into some games. Alright, this is a reasonable hand. 3 sources of hand disruption and a little bit of filtering with Grab the Prize. Alright, turn 1 of Johnny's Welcome. So it's very clear we're playing against life gain. I'm going to lead with Inquisition because that could snag the stuff lower on the curve. And, oh wow, they got some good stuff. So double Ocelot Pride, Saracended Heliod. So I'm going to take an Ocelot Pride because those can spiral very quickly, and they're already set up to go off with it with the Johnny's Welcome. So they're going to just play up both their 1-drops and then create their cat token. And boy, am I glad to see that Toxic Deluge. So it was looking pretty bleak for a second, but now that we know we have Toxic Deluge, it allows us a lot more comfort in maneuvering. So we're going to fire Thoughtseize and take Heliod. You know, Toxic Deluge is like one of the few things we have that can take down a Heliod, but that requires it at full devotion, and don't know if we're going to live long enough to see it hit full devotion. So just would rather Thoughtseize it. So opponent's getting some life. Checking the condition on Saracended, so it needs them to get clear 30 life in order for them to grow. So thankfully they're going to be short of it, despite like Ocelot Pride right here, because it would just suck to have to pay way more life into Toxic Deluge, you know. So we're gonna get a Surveil Land. Lightning Bolt seems incredible in this matchup with all the little creatures they have, so going to keep that, and going to be a little cautious at the life total here. Like, we have a sort of painful mana base, so I'm just going to get a basic. It seems like we can get more red sources at our leisure, and we're going to be paying life right here anyway. So I'm going to Toxic Deluge for 1, just sweep everything away. Move on with our life. Let's see if the opponent has a follow-up. Alright, so Authority of the Consuls, and then we draw Chrome Mox. So I'm going to leave it Grab the Prize, pitching Thoughtseize. It seems to be like basically a dead card at this point. The opponent's most likely just playing everything they draw. Alright, we draw Damnation and a Kroxa. Well, Kroxa is amazing right here. So we only playing 2 copies, but that's like one of our main, like, fastest closers. You know, like Kroxa can shell out tons of damage, so I'm gonna throw it out there. Now its ETBs are gonna be a little bit nerfed by Authority of the Consuls, gaining them some life. Plus their life gain deck naturally, so they'll be able to stave things off a little bit. Alright, there's a Guide of Souls. And we already have that covered with the Lightning Bolt. So I'm going to just escape Kroxa right here. And I'm being careful with the stuff I exile from the graveyard, because we are Sorceress's Schemes deck, which recurs instants and sorceries from our graveyard. So I want to try and leave as many options as possible. So when you escape Kroxa, you got to be conscious of that. So just trying to be choosy with our removal right here, though Guide of Souls is a very dangerous creature to keep around. I'm going to just get a Surveil Land right here, and feeling pretty good at this point. Alright, there's Sorceress's Scheme, so that's going to allow us to just have our pick of whatever is left in our graveyard, and excited to attack and get the game over with. But the opponent ripped a path to exile, so now we're really slowed in our efforts to end this game. We're only running 2 copies of Kroxa, and that's one argument to maybe running like at least 1 more copy or some other closer, because the way this deck works is, you know, given enough time and enough mana, Sorceress's Schemes can loop two Sorceress schemes can loop each other and then keep cycling lightning bolts, and like you can get there that way. Alright, so the opponent plays a Cleric class, which is life gain amplifier, but down the road can actually recur a creature, so just have to keep that in mind. So we do have Lurrus as a way to potentially close. Alright, and there's a Heliod. Now, when battling against exile removal, sometimes it's best to not escape Kroxa and just to loop it from the graveyard using Lurrus's ability. So that's always an option. So I'm going to Chrome Mox away Damnation. We have 2 Damnations, 2 Chrome Moxes, and we're a very mana hungry deck. And I'm going to Sorceress's Schemes back a Lightning Bolt right here, because you can see the opponent now has a Heliod, which is pretty dangerous, and they're already lurking with 4 White Devotion. Alright, so they miss a creature right there, and they're just going to level up Cleric class to level 2. So what I'm hoping to do is collect enough removal to just keep knocking Heliod back down to 4 Devotion so it can't attack us, because there's still a pretty low life total, and our removal does not line up against Heliod. So they finally got to the last level of Cleric class. They're going to bring back an Ocelot Pride, which then activates Heliod, but we have it covered. Now I'm waiting for them to place the counter. The thing is, our lightning bolts face up, so that's like a slight mistake from the opponent right there. What they should do is just keep placing the counters on Heliod, just creating like a super Heliod. Like when we have like face up removal like that, there's no point in like trying to place it on the creatures. I mean, I guess they can check to see if we don't kill it, but we need to keep Heliod off Devotion. So I'm gonna fire Cling to Dust right here on Path to Exile just to like draw a new card. Checking out what we have in our own graveyard for the purpose of escaping it. Alright, there's a Resentful Revelation. Alright, Thoughtseize is basically a dead card. I'm going to start with Resentful Revelation to see what we can find. Nothing super useful. I'm going to grab Fell the Profane because it's like an instant speed interaction. I'm going to throw Chrome Mox out there with Thoughtseize. So we're running a ton of targeted discard, which obviously in the late game becomes dead, and then that's why I'm running stuff like, that's what Chrome Mox can do, is you can make use of dead cards later on, and then a couple like rummaging effects we have can do that as well. So here comes another Ocelot Pride, but we have that covered with Fell the Profane. Once again, I'm waiting to see where they place the counter first before killing it, and they target the cat once again. Like I said, I think they should have focused on building a super Heliod when we have... Well, I guess they didn't know we had removal at that point, so they didn't know we had that. So now I'm going to play a land, and we're getting there, and Lurrus has thankfully buffered our life total. So I'm going to Sorceress's Schemes back, Fell the Profane. It's not as mana efficient as Lightning Bolt, but I'm still not entirely sure what kind of creatures they could have. There's a Voice of the Blessed. So right now it looks like Lightning Bolt could cover basically everything that they draw. So now the opponent's placing the counters on Heliod. I'm just going to shoot down the Voice of the Blessed. And we're doing a good job of just keeping their Heliod just under 5 Devotion. But the thing is, if they draw any enchantments, then we're in trouble. Then Heliod's going to stick around. So, alright, crashing with Lurrus once again. Another copy of Sorceress's Schemes. Checking their graveyard, and then at this point, decide just to get Lightning Bolt, because that's going to allow us to keep Bolt up and also keep Cling to Dust up as a card draw source. Alright, so opponent rips a land. They actually have no more non-creatures in their graveyard, so I'm just going to get rid of a land from our own graveyard. Now this is a little tricky, like I don't want to like fizzle the spell by accidentally getting rid of the land I'm targeting with the... Anyway, I don't know if that even would fizzle it. Alright, so we finally drew another Kroxa, so... But now I'm a little paranoid that they could have like swords or paths that they could draw and then take down Kroxa. So... because they've been able to remove it before, I might just keep it in the graveyard for Lurrus to loop with its ability. And so, thinking about it, at this point I don't think we need Damnation, and we could always get it back later with Sorceress's Scheme. So I'm going to grab the prize it away. The opponent's going to give us some extra lifelink on Lurrus. And then there's a Den of the Bugbear, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to loop Kroxa once with Lurrus. Once again, this is being nerfed by the Authority of the console, so it's not going to deal quite as much damage all in all. So, and Heliod is getting quite nasty over there, but it seems like we've got a lot of things covered. We've got a Fatal Push in hand, we've got a Bolt in hand. So there's a Johnny's Way. So it took them some time to find the 5th Source of Devotion. And at this, so if that had happened earlier, we would have had a lot more difficult time. As it stands, we just ripped one of our ways to actually kill enchantments with the Molten Collapse. So we're going to take down Authority of the Consoles, which will shut down Heliod once again, and the opponent's seen enough at that point. So awesome little grindy game against mono white life gain. And on to the next one. Going to lead with Inquisition, just see what we're dealing with. And okay, with Natural Order and a bunch of efficient creatures. Going to take Deathrite Shaman. Just want to like stop them from deploying their hand as much as possible. Not to mention Deathrite Shaman is graveyard hate, and we're like a graveyard deck. And then we get immediately Thoughtseize bug. The opponent rips a new Deathrite Shaman. So that's pretty unfortunate. But what I'm going to do here is actually Cling to Dust and get rid of their fetch land in their graveyard. That's going to draw us a card and deny them any mana acceleration, because they were like really leaning on Deathrite and Llanowar to like play out their hand. So now they're forced to just play Llanowar and hope that it survives so they can start deploying their stuff. And we draw Chrome Mox. It's a little early in the game to do this, but I'm going to fire off a Damnation right here. So I'm going to Chrome Mox away Sorceress Schemes. We have extra ones, and it's early in the game, like we don't need its utility at this point. And I'm going to fetch a land and just rip a Damnation right here. That's going to take down their mana dorks and really set them at a disadvantage. Now note that there was a priority pass there, so I'm like, alright, what did they draw that could give them priority on our turn with no mana? Like, could it be like Surgical? But then I was like, you know what, it's probably Endurance. Seeing how they appear to be like a fairly creature heavy deck, considering they have the green-black, and there's an Endurance right there. So they are going to attack our graveyard. I was very surprised to see them get rid of the Natural Order, but I guess they figured they were miles away from casting it. So yeah, White of the Reliquary, and just seeing how creature dense their draws have been makes me think that they're like turbo creature deck. So they did draw the land, and they have double Bowmaster, so we're definitely not out of the woods right now. And as we think about what to do, I'll go ahead and link a creature dense deck of my own right here. So going to Cling to Dust Natural Order. They could have Bowmastered in response, but they might have been worried about us like trying to like bait them into putting a Bowmasters into play. So they do eventually put one into play, and as the opponent shoots us, please dread white the like button if you like these unorthodox control decks. So now we have Lurrus in hand. The opponent has Bowmasters in play. Fell the Profane is nice. We equally want it as a land and as a spell right now, so it's a little bit tough. Going to play Lurrus and just wait right here. Now, the opponent could rush out Bowmasters and just create like an Orc army to attack us, but then they don't have the option of attacking into Lurrus and possibly shooting it. So by keeping Bowmasters in hand, it keeps both their offensive and defensive options open. So I like them holding on to Bowmasters here, because we can't attack with Lurrus because they can always shoot it and block with one of the 1/1s, you know. So they are going to Thoughtseize us, which is really, really nice. Like, I can understand why they do it, but that's really good for us because that uses up their single black mana, and we have 2 flashback spells anyway. And then we rip our own Thoughtseize. So it just worked really unfortunately from the opponent. Okay, so we see one of their Natural Order targets right there with the Atraxa. So going to crash in with Lurrus. Now, would love if we had like a Lightning Bolt right here to get back. As it stands, I'm just going to get back a Fell the Profane with Sorceress Schemes. Like, they have a million creatures, and we're just going to have that lurking for whatever comes next. Alright, and then Demonic Tutor is incredible here. So, going to crash in with Lurrus. And basically, this was a mana denial game. We we killed all their mana dorks so they couldn't deploy their hand, and just sort of really stifled their development. So what do you get at this point with Demonic Tutor, you know? And I decided to get a Kroxa to start like closing the game out. It's going to rip the cards in their hand and give them like give us a very quick clock against them. So we're going to see what the opponent has. Or there's a Scythecat Cub, and they're going to attack in. So that is at very least holding back Lurrus. I decide to, because I want to keep attacking with Lurrus and gaining life, I'm just going to use Lurrus to cast Kroxa here, and then shock in the land and just take down the Scythecat Club, because that opens up Lurrus dealing a bunch of damage to them. It takes out the card in their hand, you know, it just very mana efficient plays from us. Alright, so there's Scythecat Cub, and points shipping in for 1. And there's the Molten Collapse. So the opponent is super dead at this point, yeah, and they pack it in. So on to the next one. Very lightning bolt dense hand right here. No hand disruption. Against opposing hand disruption, I am going to play Chrome Mox out right here. And just play a fetch land and pass. You could see me frequently stuffing Sorceress's schemes under Chrome Mox in the early game because it's a late game card, and so early on it's better utility to have it under a Chrome Mox or something like that. So gonna get a Surveil land. Now we always see is a Polluted Delta from them, and I'm trying to decide, you know, like, is this a like a combo deck, you know, like Omnitel where we don't want it, or is this a Psychic Frog deck, Tamiyo deck where we do want it? Made with 2 bolts in hand, decide just to get rid of it, but it is a tough call. And we had the Damnation in hand, you know, it's like we have like a ton of removal, so really hoping to find some hand disruption. Our opponent gets basic island, plays basic swamp, and a Baleful Strix. So usually Baleful Strix is indicative of a Flare of Denial deck. You know, there's different configurations, but they play a lot of sort of expendable creatures or creatures that come with card advantage attached to then feed Flare of Denial. So going to just put Lurrus into hand and pass and see what's up. Our opponent's going to fire off Brainstorm. And let's see what else they got going for us. Now, it seems like they might have been cautious with their basics. They might have been thinking we were... No, I guess they wouldn't think we were Blood Moon decks. We're a Lurrus deck. We can't be a Blood Moon deck. Alright, so we're going to crack the fetch and see what we can find. Get a Surveil land. And honest... Okay, Thoughtseize is incredible. It's exactly what I was fishing for. Some hand disruption. Because it's either going to force them to like spew off a Flare of Denial, or it's going to allow us to see what's going on in their hand. Okay, so opponent has some excellent stuff. I'm going to actually take the Spell Pierce here. The reason is that's their strongest means currently of interfering with what we're trying to do. And we can play around Stern Scalding and Fatal Push. So we have like Damnation and Toxic Deluge in hand. So what we want to try and do is get them to like just flood the board with all their creatures. Now the problem is that a savvy player won't play into a Wrath like that, you know. Especially when they have Bowmasters and stuff they can like hang over our heads. So I'm going to try and... So I'm going to bolt the Psychic Frog on purpose, knowing that they can do exactly this. And they do have some like dead cards like Fatal Push to pitch into it, but you could see that we actually got rid of a Bowmasters by doing that. So I'm going to Damnation right here. A Psychic Frog that large seems too dangerous, and we have backup Toxic Deluge at this point. So, but that was something we weren't expecting, an Abhorrent Oculus, which is really dangerous. So I was hoping to clean up the Frog with the Toxic Deluge and they'd be feeling pretty good. But right now, Oculus is way too dangerous, so I'm going to just Toxic Deluge that down right now. It is really costly to pay 5 life, but we cannot let that thing survive even like one more turn, then we're just dead, you know. So here's the Frog, and they play the land, which is amazing because they could have held it to pump the Psychic Frog, but they played it, which allows us to bolt down the frog, and so all of a sudden we're doing a lot better. Now the thing is, Lurrus is currently covered right now by Stern Scalding, so we're going to have to play around that. Alright, so the opponent's going to pass. Just going to fire off Cling to Dust and want to draw cards. Like, there is an argument to keeping it up for, like, they seem like they play Unearth or Reanimate in their deck. You know, usually Oculus decks are doing something like that. I'm checking my graveyard right here because, you know, obviously would love to flash back or to escape Cling to Dust, but also want to escape Kroxa. Oh, Demonic Tutor is excellent. So, gonna just start stripping their hand with Kroxa. Once again, they have that Stern Scalding, so they're probably gonna hold on to that with dear life against Lurrus. All right, and then we get rid of a Bowmasters, and so decide to use Demonic Tutor. Now, what would you get in this situation? The opponent decides they don't want to wait and see, but honestly, I wasn't sure what I was going to get. It did feel like we were in a strong position there. But, you know, if they ripped like a Treasure Cruise or something, it could have changed. So, we're in the next game, though. So, we're going to Thoughtseize, and it's another blue-black deck. I think this is a mistake by me right here, taking Thoughtseize. We don't really care if they discard any of our stuff. I think I should have taken Brainstorm instead. Because that allows... Brainstorm plus Fetches just gives them so much more action to, like, find something, you know. Whereas if we would have taken Brainstorm, then they would have just sort of been sitting there. You know, they could have Thoughtseized us, but we don't really care about any of our cards hitting the graveyard. So going to Kroxa right here. Opponent's going to crack their fetch. And they're going to Brainstorm in response. That's going to give them more information and allow them to just put their strongest cards on top of the deck, you know. So now there is, like, we could like Surgical right here to try and snipe like a Brainstorm from their hand, you know, like there's some options. They end up pitching another Goyf, and I'm going to set an upkeep stop, and then on their draw step I'm going to Surgical another Goyf. That's just an annoying creature that they can keep bringing back, and we might be able to take one out of their hand right here. So firing off Surgical, and their hand, and you could see the danger of leaving a Brainstorm behind. Their hand is improved massively post Brainstorm. So we're going to take all the Nether Goyfs. I'm going to do a quick look through their deck. So we see Mana Drains, we see more Bowmasters, we see more Frogs, a couple Tamios, and then like some pretty standard fare right there. So yeah, I'm going to take all those. And it looks like they could have a Lurrus Companion. I don't think I saw anything that broke it, but they don't have one. Alright, so they're going to just play out a Bowmasters right here. And things are looking incredibly bad right now after they were looking reasonable at the start of the game. And once again, I think it came down to my choice of turn 1 discard, because you could see how Brainstorm like transformed their hand, and we just have like nothing going on. So I think this red-black control deck could maybe use a little bit more hand selection, like maybe more Resentful Revelations or ways to filter through cards. Alright, so they're pitching Psychic Frog into Psychic Frog right here. This is a little bit of a desperation move, but I feel like it's the best way to fight against what they have going on. So I'm going to bolt the Psychic Frog, even though they can very clearly protect it. But it's going to basically, Lightning Bolt is going to be a discard 2 right here. It's taking out Treasure Cruise, and it took out Toxic Deluge, which they weren't going to cast anyway. I mean, I guess they could X2 it to kill Lurrus, but anyway, so we're going to eat some Psychic Frog damage, but we desperately need a like Fatal Push or like some sort of unconditional removal right here. So Thonian Nightmare is a nightmare scenario for us, because they're going to be able to sack the Orc army and put a new Psychic Frog into play. So we really need a Wrath right here. So going to Surveil and put Resentful Revelation in the graveyard. So what I'm going to do here is just escape a Kroxa, because you know we're in pretty big danger from Psychic Frogs right now killing us, but we can, you know, at least attack him with Lurrus right here. And as we try and smash him with Lurrus, let me know in the comments what's your favorite carded flashback. Playing around with Sorceress's schemes here, is it faithless looting or spider spawning, let me know. Alright, so opponent is going to send Psychic Frog to the skies, send both of them to the skies. Now we're not entirely dead right here, but it's looking really bleak. Like, would love to get one more attack in and then just sort of damnation everything, but it's looking pretty bad right here. Alright, so they managed to find a fatal push for the Kroxa. So this is basically it. We're attacking in, and it's just frankly not going to be enough, so we're on to the next game. This hand, it's sort of weird. Like, we have all of our MDFCs and all of our Chrome Moxes, and so we have like the options are off the charts as far as what you could do, but what should you do is the question. I end up bolting this in, and I'm going to fire off an Inquisition just to get some more information first. Okay, so we see Harbinger of the Seas and some other like sort of card advantage-y blue creatures. So, you know, the other creatures either mill or like look at the top of your deck to put non-creatures into hand. So, gonna stick Sorceress' schemes under the Chrome Mox and pass. They don't seem like they're playing hand disruption, but that's what's happening right now. So they're gonna play Thunder Trap Trainer, and they're going to grab Flare of Denial. So I'm gonna fire off Thoughtseize right here, and just gonna take their Flare of Denial. Now this is the unfortunate part right here, is so I think this is a mistake. Given that they're a Harbinger deck, I should have pitched Shatterskull Smashing and kept the Chrome Mox to tuck a black card under to protect ourselves from getting like Harbingered, you know. I think that would have been better. The mentality here is like, oh well, if they, you know, yeah, it's just bad mentality to keep the kill spell right here, because it's just gonna be difficult to get that through all their defenses against a Harbinger in play. And we could see the pieces coming together. So they have all these blue sort of trinkety card advantage creatures to find Flare of Denials. And we're just sort of setting ourselves up right now to get got by Harbinger. So I play that land. I was going to play Kroxa, but I timed out, and so it just sort of dumped the land into play without shocking it, but still in time. Anyway, it was just an unfortunate timeout right there. And then we get whammied by a Harbinger. So this is a frustrating one because I think it was very preventable. So now, you know, we found a new Chrome Mox, which obviously we need to stick Kroxa under. But they're going to snap counter that with Flare of Denial because that keeps us off our mana. So I think were it not for that poor play, like just not thinking ahead, like, oh yeah, I need to Chrome Mox and get a black source, you know, secured. Then we could have had way more options to start killing their stuff. Like, there are a bunch of small creatures. Now, Birthing Ritual is really interesting. So I actually really love the concept the opponent has. So they have some creatures that mill and a lot of expendable things to feed into Birthing Ritual. But they grind us out and we move on to the next game. So I did like the deck concept that they were playing, though. It seems like it would be hard to balance creatures versus non-creatures, but it is a very interesting concept. Alright, blue-white land from the opponent. Gonna just put Kroxa in the graveyard. It's useful there, and want to see if we can find some hand disruption against them. Alright, so there's a Thoughtseize. So, gonna just fire that off and see what's going on. Alright, the opponent is gonna No More Lies our Thoughtseize. They're just gonna take care of that, and gonna play a land and pass right here. So I did set a stop on their upkeep. I'm going to wait till they get to their draw step, and I'm going to Surgical for 0 mana to hit their No More Lies. I want to see what's going on. But the opponent, it turns out they did have a No More Lies, and they're going to deny us our Surgical right there. But it does take up their whole turn. So the opponent is keeping their secrets away from us right now. So we're going to grab a Surveil right here and see what's going on. Fatal Push, honestly, like, it seems right now it feels like I'm playing like against blue-white control, you know. So I'm going to get rid of the Fatal Push and going to fire off, grab the prize with shields are down presumably. I'm going to get rid of the Kroxa and see what we can find. Found some more lands, thankfully. All right, so the opponent plays Azure Beastbinder. and we find a Chrome Mox. So what do we do? So I'm just checking it out again. Now when it attacks, it has the ability to like nerf things temporarily. So going to grab a Thoughtseize right here and try and see what's going on. So we're going to Thoughtseize, and opponent plays Slip Out the Back and has a Sheltered by Ghost in hand, which we're going to take because that would be really nasty against our Chrome Mox. So it's becoming clear the opponent is more of like a tempo deck right here. And so they're hoping to keep the opponent off balance with like Beastbinder attacks, and then, you know, just keep loading it up with stuff like Sheltered by Ghosts. So what do we do against it? So we have options. We have Kroxa, we have Lurrus in the companion zone. Decide at this point that it's best to Kroxa when their shields are down. Once again, you have to be very careful about what you choose because this is a Sorceress of Schemes deck right here. So, alright, so opponent pitches a land and going to crack right here and get another red source. And I am going to Chrome Mox away Inquisition to set up our mana for Molten Collapse right here. So just going to take down their creature and really limit their options. Now they do have a creature land, which can just keep crashing. We are only at 8 life, but the thing is, Kroxa can kill them faster than their creature land can kill us as it stands. So they're going to send in with the Restless Anchorage with their map token, and they're just going to crack it right away, try and grow their creature. Alright, they find another land. Alright. I was considering the Thoughtseize right there. Going to crash in, and the thing is, we are like a sort of dangerous life total, but just going to use it, and boy am I glad it did. Shelter by Ghosts. Even if it was temporary right there, it would have been pretty annoying. So going to Sorceress of Schemes back a Fatal Push, and that's basically going to lock it up, barring some like crazy removal draw from them. So the opponent doesn't like what they see, and that's enough. Well, that was pretty cool, and you could see that it's like a sort of unorthodox, interesting strategy, like really trying to grind out games, like heavy discard and heavy removal, and just trying to extend a late game where you can start looping Sorceress of Schemes and going wild. Maybe could use a little bit more closing power, like maybe one more copy of Kroxa in there to stumble across it more frequently. It did seem like we struggled sometimes to like find the cards we needed, so maybe the solution instead is 2 more copies of Resentful Revelation. I really think this might be like the Black Brainstorm, like it digs you pretty deep, it dumps stuff in the graveyard, and so it helps fuel your escape cards and help you find like what you need. Could be that is what the solution is, and maybe 4 copies of this is too ambitious, but when you can stick them under Chrome Mox or pitch them to grab the prize, like I think it's okay. Some other stuff I was thinking about, there's a lot of options for what you could include in this deck. This deck doesn't seem like it can utilize the speed of a Dark Ritual. Chrome Mox is a more natural fit because we can, you know, use that mana over time and like really take advantage of it. We don't really need the burst mana. Collective Brutality is something I was thinking about to like pitch situational cards into, but it's just pure card disadvantage, and like anyway, it's one on my radar but didn't quite make it. Now card advantage is very tough in this deck in these colors. The main way we get it is just by rebuying stuff with Sorceress of Schemes. That's pretty inefficient, but Night's Whisper is something I was thinking about, but we lose so much life in this deck, like, and have a painful mana base. Wasn't quite sure this is the right fit, but maybe we need a copy or 2 in there. Artist Talent was sort of like a fun thing I was thinking about, but I think it's a little too mana intensive for what this deck wants. Faithless Salvaging is something I was considering, but ultimately I think Grab the Prize is better, even though it's sorcery speed, because it deals damage to them, and it's discard 1 to draw 2, so I think it's ultimately a little bit stronger. It could be like a win condition looping with Sorceress Schemes as well. Rakdos Charm is something I was thinking about because it has like a lot of different utility, and it can blow up Chrome Moxes and stuff like that, but I think the other sources the Graveyard Hate are better. And the last mode, like, I don't know if we honestly shell out enough damage to actually kill people with the last mode. Like, you think of an Energy Start where they've gone super wide, well, you're usually dead by then anyway, so didn't end up including it. Any Lurrus deck should consider Mishra's Bauble at the very least, but control decks like don't want to have like, you know, a card that they cash in and then see what it turns into later. Like they sort of want to know what their options are. This is better in like Delirium decks and stuff like that. Suplex could blow up Chrome Moxes and like exile small creatures, so something to think about. As it stands, we don't have any answers to the One Ring, so Angrath's Rampage could be one way to like have an answer to the One Ring with like a little bit extra utility. So just something to think about. And probably the one I'm most curious about is Wrath of the Sky. So that would require like change in the mana base, changing a lot about the deck, but it's just such a good way as a sorcery to like deal with a ton of different card types all in one go. We might need to ditch the Chrome Mox plan if you went with this, because we'd be blowing up tons of our own stuff, but I could see this actually being like a really strong way. You know, like X=1 can like really set energy back or blow up a bunch of Chrome Moxes, you know, so it might be worth it to dip into white for Wrath of the Skies and maybe Swords to Plowshares while you're at it, you know, so could be an interesting direction to take this deck in. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. And that's the deck. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see even more nonsense, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Your engagement with the channel helps me know what the people want. Thank you.